This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
Are you a cannabis operator whose SOPs are tied directly to your cultivation plans? Can you easily manage your inventory or workforce and vendors from a single system? Or can you manage compliance across multiple licenses and states? If the answer is no, then you need to stop and talk to the team at Regrow. Regrow is the first of its kind software that leverages components of leading ERP and supply chain systems with the necessary compliance of the cannabis industry. Basically, Regrow serves as the single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain that will help you increase your revenue while keeping your entire operation fully compliant. So if you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Tobi Lebowitz. She's the EVP and co-head of legal affairs at Jushi Holdings. Hello, Tobi. How are you?
I'm doing great this morning, Kevin.
Thank you so much for making time for me and my audience today. I'm excited to talk with you.
I'm really excited to be here. It's really an honor that you invited me to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to our conversation as well.
Absolutely. Yes, it's going to be an interesting and fun one. Fun, I guess, from my perspective. Your day-to-day might be a little more hectic because you're in the legal cannabis space. For those listening, Tobi is the EVP and co-head of legal affairs at Jushi Holdings. So, Tobi, before we get into your world of legal cannabis, why don't you tell us how you got started in the cannabis industry?
Okay, so I kind of fell in the cannabis industry, I think like a lot of people. I was working at a publicly traded company that was purchased by a larger publicly traded company. And I knew that my next role, I wanted it to be less corporate and more entrepreneurial. And cannabis really has both of those characteristics, at least for now. About the same time, I was recruited by a corporate recruiter. And funny enough, I know one of the founders socially from Jushi, and we had kind of swapped notes on the legal context of, lawyers to engage or, what's going on in the legal field generally. But he didn't actually recruit me for the position. It was a third-party recruiter reached out to me. I called the founder because he's the person that I knew at the time in the industry to be like, hey, have you heard of this company? He's like, that's my company. And then the rest, I guess, is history.
What was so that's crazy, small world first, right? And then what was your initial thoughts when you were approached by a cannabis company, right? Like I would imagine in your legal background, you weren't much of a consumer at that point. I mean, maybe you've tried it, but was that kind of new to you? And did you dismiss it at first, or were you kind of intrigued?
I was really intrigued. I've always been a little bit of a rebel, go against the grain kind of person. And a friend of mine knew a different friend of mine that I worked for at the same law firm that I was at previously, knew the recruiter and said, hey, I think that my friend Toby might be interested. I know she was looking for, a startup company, something, fast paced. And when the recruiter called me, I was like, look, I got to do more research, but I'm game. I did pause a little bit because the Cole memorandum had been pulled the year before. And we didn't really know what President Trump was doing with the industry. Right. So it did give me a little bit of pause, but I spoke to my current co-head of legal, Matt Leaf, and he had already been hired by the company and was working there already. And I must have had like 3 different hour plus conversations with him to drill down on, what do you do with your mortgage? Like, how is,
Due
how do you get
diligence,
paid? Yeah,
personal life due diligence work, right?
exactly. And he made me feel very comfortable. And now looking back on it, I kind of laugh. Nothing's really changed, but from a legal perspective, I just think it's a lot more accepted overall, particularly in the country. I think there was a Gallup poll in November around the election time that found that 68% of Americans favored legalizing marijuana. So, I mean, I'm definitely in the majority now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so ironic, and yet we still have, people getting fired for their jobs, right? For even just admitting that they've used marijuana previously. And it's not even that it's in their system, which is crazy. But we are seeing that public support, of course, kind of grow, right? What was the feedback from your peers? Some of the people from your former company or even previous companies, like, were they like, this is career suicide, it's cannabis, don't do it, Toby? Or, what was their reaction?
So when I polled my, friends and family and colleagues, everybody was like, do it.
Nice,
I guess I had
nice.
already been a law firm lawyer. I was partner at a law firm in a regional based firm out of Miami for several years. And then I had went in-house an aerospace company, which was a federal contractor. So completely the other side of the spectrum. And I think people were just like, hey, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back and you've got a lot of experiences and go do something else. I maybe had one person that was worried about, if there was going to be, something happened to my bar license, but there were so many people already. I mean, I was an early comer, but I was a late comer, I guess, in a way, because there were already so many people and particularly legal professionals in the business. No one, had their bar license, touched. They speak at conferences put on by
Right.
like local bar associations. And, so I didn't really, I felt comfortable, doing that. And really once I jumped in, it's really like working at any other, big company, public company.
Sure.
Most of the same issues and things that I see on a daily basis with that little extra, oh, it's federally illegal, but I don't think about that on the daily.
Yeah, that little nuance, right? Yeah. Well, it's becoming more of a little nuance because we're seeing so many states coming online. You mentioned, the 68% public support that we're now seeing. And it's actually a good transition because that makes sense what you were talking about, where some of your colleagues and peers, they weren't as shocked because some of them or most of them were already in the space, right? Because from my perspective, being a lawyer or an attorney, it seems so opportunistic to be in cannabis right now, right? So that's the segue. Let's start there and talk about, like, what are some of the toughest legal issues that the cannabis industry faces today? Obviously, we got banking, other things, but what do you think are some of the toughest from your perspective?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, which I think is kind of the biggest one for the industry as a whole. And hopefully, we're in a place where we can move towards federal legislation, at least the Safe Banking Act. But we can talk about that separately, a whole nother topic. But as far as, really like purely legal issues, because the subject, that the company, is in is federally illegal, that you have a lot of consequences from that. And one of the biggest ones is that you've got, kind of a juxtaposition between, the state says, this is legal, but then you've got this kind of, federal illegality on top of it. And so because of that, the state regulations aren't always crystal clear on how to do things. And there are a ton of state regulations. There are a ton of local regulations. So it's something you have to deal with literally on a daily basis. I'm not even the attorney in our little mini law firm in the company that is, that's not my expertise, but I touch, some state or local regulation every day, whether it's an HR issue, litigation, even touches on it. contract review. We always want to make sure, we're choosing a right venue or jurisdiction so that we're not in a situation where we don't know what the law will be if there's a, federal versus state view on something. But really on the state regulation side, kind of going back to that, you don't have, because the industry is so new, you don't really have precedent. So you can't really look and see what everyone else is doing and if that worked or didn't work. We're starting to see some of that now, which is really nice because we can have a decision point, like an issue come up, and one of our data points that we'll look at is, okay, has anyone else done this and what happened? And so we're starting to be able to bring that in as a data point. But the last 2 years, it's very difficult to find if someone followed one regulation one way or another, what happened. And so that, to me, I think is the toughest. You're kind of trailblazing, which is also exciting and fun because you can choose, your practical, you make decisions that are practical and that everyone can live with, and that you try to draw on other experiences in your legal and business mind to get to the right answer, and you hope that it's the right answer.
Yeah, it sounds like time is like the big constraint, right? Like, because y'all are moving so fast, going, expanding your footprints in these, and I think the 6 different states that you currently have a presence in. But like you said, the legislation and then the learning of how others have done it and what they've experienced within that legislative path or whatever, the regulations, it hasn't happened yet, right? So you're just kind of waiting to put, but then you have to make those decisions as well, because you also have to keep operations moving. So I can imagine that that's a challenge. The other challenge that I can't even start to fathom is like, okay, you mentioned the dichotomy between the federal regulation and the states, how they're all different, but then there's so many verticals, right, within cannabis. And I know that Jushi is vertically integrated. So you've got cultivation regulation, you have extraction lab regulation, you have testing, right, of your products. I mean, manufacturing, it's got to be insane.
Yeah, that's why I had said basically anything I do on a daily basis touches on some sort of regulation. We built out, and in the process of growing it, a strong compliance department. We were fortunate enough to be able to recruit somebody who worked at a Colorado-based cannabis company, and Colorado has been legal for a very long time, compared to the rest of the industry. And so he's able to draw upon those experiences there and kind of guide us in the right direction on, what SOP, to develop, SOPs and policies and procedures to have in place to follow every, one of those regulations. And that's really how we do it. We look at the regulation and then we say, okay, how can we practically follow this regulation? And then we write out the steps on how people should follow the regulation. And then those steps become your standard operating procedure. And then that's what our cultivators follow. That's what our manufacturers follow. That's what our retail employees follow. You almost have to have an SOP in place for almost everything because it is very detailed. But we don't expect our kind of retail employees to learn every regulation, but we do expect them to follow our policies and procedures that we have in place. So that's how we deal with that. But yeah, they're always changing. We're always reviewing them. And you kind of mentioned the whole thing about, time, as time goes on, things are getting better. And I found that really with the service providers, that used to be a huge challenge for us. We couldn't hire, our you couldn't get contract software of our choice, or we couldn't get kind of like the banking, or we had law firms that weren't taking cannabis clients, and we're seeing a huge shift in that, where because of everything being more acceptable from a public perception perspective, a lot of people are like, hey, I'm getting into it. And so we're getting a lot more help and assistance in able to do our daily jobs, because as time goes on, more people are cool with it.
That's great. It's really encouraging to hear. And you brought up a good point that I was thinking about also. Another challenge is like how you said the regulations are continually evolving and changing, right? So you almost have to have like a pulse directly on what's happening in each state, because there's regulations that could change, or new regulations that could be passed, and if you're not up to date with all that stuff, you could find yourself in a bad position.
Absolutely. And we have a government affairs and legislative affairs attorney who is dedicated to just that in all the states that we're in. She's on the pulse of what's going on the ground, listens to all of the, um, you know, bill hearings. And I don't even know. She's an expert in that.
Constantly glued to Twitter and like, yeah.
Yeah, whatever the state level equivalent to C-SPAN is, she's like in there watching all that kind of stuff and really bringing us back the key information that we need to know of what's going on and when things are changing. So we've been really agile in growing our company in a very thoughtful way. So we'll, knowing that the legislations change all the time, or that compliance, having to comply with so many things is a big deal and really important in the industry. We've made sure that we've hired key people who have either experience in the cannabis industry or relatable experience that they can bring to us. And so we've been really, really lucky that we've had some great people that that I'm able to work with on a daily basis.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's an important role, and it's good that you have that, those insights and that support, because it's one person can't, wear all these hats. There's got to be it's got to be a team effort, especially
Right.
within the legal space. So tell me, what are the top legal issues that you yourself are really kind of top of mind for you with at Jushi?
So I co-head legal, so I share the job responsibility, thankfully, with another person. I
There's
mentioned
that team effort again. See, yeah.
Matt Leith. I actually just was on the phone with him right before the podcast, and swapping our notes for the morning. It's kind of become a morning thing organically that we, call each other 8:30, 9 o'clock. Hey, I wasn't joking. What's on the docket? What's on the agenda for today? And because everything, I feel like things come in, 24/7.
Yeah.
We have operations in California, and we actually, also have dabbled a little bit in Europe. So we've got things around the clock. We come in 8:30, 9 o'clock and already have an email box full of stuff and figure out who's doing what. So that's been really helpful. And he used to be a GC at a cannabis company in Colorado. So as far as the cannabis learning curve, he's really made that easy and fun for me. And so that to me was the best thing about, having this co-head relationship. And so really my kind of, head in the equation is on litigation. So Cannabis 1.0 has had a lot of litigation. There are a lot of people, basically flouting contracts and deciding.
What's Cannabis 1.0?
It's kind of what we call the kind of first wave of cannabis like application winners that got licenses.
Okay.
And I don't mean, there are some great cannabis operators in 1.0, but there are also there's a lot of litigation because there are a lot of people who really took a risk to get into the business super early on, and then they were able to sell their license or do business with people, and there weren't a lot of service providers in the space doing business, and so you had a lot of people who were willing to take a risk and get into the business, and it just you kind of mix that all up in a bowl and you have a lot of litigation. And so I was actually hired to really kind of parse through litigation and some pre-litigation matters. We don't have that much litigation. Our company, I think we're really thoughtful in getting it into contracts and the way we put together deals. But it happens, and like I said, in the industry, it's just you might be very careful in the way you do things, but your counterparty might not be. So it's just inevitable. So I was brought on to do that. And so I managed litigation, a lot of interesting stuff. A lot of it's just like regular commercial litigation, like I did before. But then, like I said, you've got that cannabis twist. There's always some cannabis issue that comes up that you've got to tackle. And then I really
Is
took.
there any like unique cases that you can talk about that are not like confidential or anything that kind of
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's no.
no? We'll just say that there's been some crazy probably cases or different things that have come up, right?
Yeah,
In
there's
these.
definitely been some crazy stuff that has come up, and we've just had to, like I said, it's regular litigation, then just a little spiciness because of the cannabis.
Tad of spicy.
I also think that, we're a lot of cannabis companies, again, you're more of you're the people who are starting the companies and that are attracted to work with companies are risk takers. And so you get people who are more aggressive. And so a lot of the litigation, and I'm used to aggressive litigation. I practiced in South Florida for a very long time where there's a lot of aggressive, legal matters going on. So that's kind of like my jive. But cannabis, really, you kind of, again, you've got the type of people who get into it and really, stick to their guns. And for one, we're really aggressive. Like, if somebody is not making good on a contract or is, doing something that we don't think is right, we'll commence litigation. So we've actually probably commenced litigation more than we've had litigation against us.
Right.
But it's part of the strategy.
It's part of the game.
Of the industry, really.
Yeah. Well, when there's the lack of regulation or enforcement of regulation, like you were talking about earlier, like at the state or even federal level, it's kind of the wild, wild west, right? And that's where retainers of lawyers and attorneys really come in and help because, like you said, if contracts aren't fulfilled and there's kind of mischief going on, you need to be prepared to handle that.
Yeah, and actually, I can talk about one case that we were tangentially kind of involved in, but it's more of an industry-wide thing. There was a case in Nevada that had flavors of that. There was a couple of applicants were challenging the process in Nevada and claiming that there was favoritism and all this kind of stuff. And we ended up not getting too involved in litigation, but that's exactly what happens when you've got, state regs, and we've got government agencies that are required to follow these rules, and they're
Right.
not 100% clear. And they had one interpretation, and then the applicants have another interpretation, and that's just ripe for a dispute.
Right.
So yeah, that. And then in addition to litigation, because of course it's not the only thing I get to do on a daily basis, I was actually kind of anointed when I came on board to run our go public process. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I helped the company along with our CFO and our investor relations team, and really our entire exec team, but really kind of managed the process and made sure we did that timely. We went public in June of 2019. And that was a long, tough, fast-paced project. I got a real education in the capital markets. And
there's a lot of work in there, right? I mean, the whole roadshow presentation, you have to get all your ducks in a row, and like all the work is and it's like a year long, right? Or how long is that process?
Well, we did it in like 4 months.
Wow. Whoa.
I mean, the road up to the strategy and talking about it and all that kind of stuff takes a while, but the actual, let's, draft all the documents that need to be drafted, do the, reverse takeover of the shell company and the road show. And all, we did that in like 3.5, 4 months. I feel like that's
impressive.
That's the Jushi theme. Like, you do it in 6 months, we'll do it in 4. You do it in 3 months, we'll do it in a day. Like, I feel
it's like that commercial, that song, anything you can do, I can do better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was totally thinking of that when I said that. Yeah, I feel like that's like the theme of like our work, that we do here. So it's challenging, but it's fun. And so yeah, I learned all about that. And so I'm kind of our capital markets on the legal side person. So I work really a lot with our investor relations and marketing teams. And then I have a new
Well,
job.
and the stock's done very well. I know that it's gained over 400% since you said it listed in June of 2020. So
I
hats
cannot
off to
take
the
all the
Jushi
credit,
team.
but yes, it was very, we've all worked really hard, and kind of went through some lean times to get there. So it's actually been really rewarding to see the stock where it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you, so like from your perspective, both on like the capital markets side, the litigation side, what is the most frustrating regulation or legislation at the federal level to you?
Well, I mean, I think it's really just the fact, just the fact that cannabis is on Schedule One of the Controlled Substances Act. I mean, I think that all of our problems stem from that. But I think kind of talking about the performance of the company and stuff. I think if we could, even if there isn't legislation like this year to remove cannabis from Schedule One, if we could have the Safe Banking Act passed, so at least there's relief on banking, to make it safe and healthy for people. I mean, you've got coronavirus going on where you don't want people. One of the things that CDC has talked about, like handling cash and stuff like that. So we have to, because our
That
whole,
is such a great point.
I
That
mean,
should be an angle that the cannabis industry takes. Like,
we do.
yeah, that's incredible. That is so
Yeah,
smart.
it's like you're an essential business and you have to stay open during coronavirus, but you still got to deal in cash. And so, of
Yes,
course, we put a lot of safety protocols in play during the virus, and we spent a lot of time and effort. And really, our CEO saw, this coming. As soon as all the news reports were coming out in early January, he put together, a kind of coronavirus task force and really
brilliant.
getting ahead of
Yeah,
the curve and implemented those 6 feet apart stickers and face masks, right? Like even before there was guidance from the CDC and
sure.
local regulations. But yeah, it's like cannabis, you have to do this, and we couldn't get the industry as a whole, not specific to my company, but and I'm really talking about like the smaller players in the space. They had to follow the the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, but give all the leave and that kind of stuff. But they couldn't get the SBA loans
Right.
from the,
And the companies, I mean, the businesses were deemed essential and they still wouldn't qualify, right?
right,
That's
right.
insane. Yeah, all
Which is
these little
frustrating.
nuanced stipulations are
Yeah.
frustrating. Yeah.
The Safe Banking Act, hopefully if something like that happened again, that would alleviate some of that stress. And I think other service providers will then more, even more would come into the industry.
Yeah.
And then the big one is the tax deduction, 280.
280.
So
Yeah.
yeah, again, you have to do all these things, but you still can't take your business expenses as a deduction when every other company in the entire country can. So
Yeah.
that's frustrating.
That's so I don't know a better word to use, but like underrated like that, or not very commonly known, the 280E, and it just shows like how resilient the operators. I've always said that. Like it's just amazing all the different red tape and hurdles they have to jump through, but yet like, some of them are doing really well still, so
Yeah.
it kind of speaks to the product and like the appetite for the consumers with cannabis, whether it's CBD or THC or whatever formulation they're wanting.
Yeah, I'm really proud of our brothers and sisters in the industry, because I mean there's one thing the industry has done really well is kind of we're definitely competing against each other, but we've also banded together
Yes.
on a lot of stuff. And I have a general counsel kind of roundtable that I'm a part of with all cannabis general counsels. Our head of HR has like an HR one. Our CFO is in a financial services one. So really sharing the data and the research on those areas that we all are challenged by has been really helpful and super nice. And I think it kind of goes with the theme of the industry is, forward thinking and, social
collaborative, and yeah,
collaborative. Yeah.
I totally agree. It's the culture of the industry, right? It's kind of what is exemplified from the plan. I kind of get into that little hippie mode or whatever,
Yeah.
but it's
I got my
true.
Birkenstocks on. It's totally
Yeah.
cool.
So here's another question related to reform at the federal level, or even legislation. So how tapped in are y'all, your, legal affairs team, when it comes to government policy? Like, are you talking to these policymakers? Are there meetings with them? And like, what can we expect? I know that safe banking the bill was reintroduced. So what are your predictions?
Yeah, so I can't get into specifically, what we're doing internally, but I can tell you that I know the industry is on it. And this week, Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat from Oregon, and Steve Daines, a Republican from Montana, along with 27 other senators, reintroduced the Safe Banking Act. I think, there are so many things going on in the country,
Right.
the pandemic. You've got these terrible, violent events that just, happened in Atlanta and, Colorado. And so I think, as far as timing goes, it's hard to tell.
Sure.
If I had a crystal ball, I would, I'm not going to go to the crystal ball route. Do I personally think the Safe Banking Act should pass? Yes.
Right.
But I mean, when that's going to happen and how that will happen is a whole nother story that I
Sure.
think it's time will tell. You've got president and vice president support for the cannabis industry. I mean, during their election campaign, they both voiced support for federal cannabis legislation, even going as far as taking it off, full, decriminalizing it fully.
Right.
So I'd like
But
to see all those
that's
things.
where I get confused though with Biden's move of firing his staffers. Is it? I mean, from a legal perspective, I guess he's obligated to do so because it's Schedule 1, right? But
Yeah.
it just seems like weird to me because you have his former boss, former President Obama, who went on record saying that he's consumed. So he
Yeah.
admitted it. He wasn't fired. I don't know. It just seemed like a very odd move. I don't know if it was politically driven. I don't know what it was, but like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there and if there was another, something else in the background. I always feel like in politics, like it's never actually what it looks like.
Right. Right.
Working, in the
Yeah.
background. President Biden has voiced support for decriminalizing, but yeah, he's still got to deal with the fact that cannabis is still on the Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances
Right.
Act. And so I don't know if there's some kind of requirement when you're on the staff or whatever that maybe when you get background checked and enrolled, you've got to say what you've done or what you haven't done. I was a federal clerk, and I remember there was like a pretty heavy federal background check process. Now I'm going back like 15 years, 15 years, but I do remember I had to get like fingerprinted. I had to answer a bunch of
Oh
like
yeah, it's like super
questions.
stringent, right? Like
Yeah. So
yeah.
maybe there's something that they answered a question one way and now it's coming out that it's another way, where maybe President Obama didn't have to answer that question, or maybe he from the very beginning said.
Right. Right. Well, my advice to future staffers, just lie about that then, Just say you haven't.
Or don't lie about it. Maybe that was the problem. I have no idea. Maybe they put something down and then it came out later that it was actually something else.
Yeah, we don't know right. We don't know the details, but yeah, no, it was just interesting. But another topic that I want to talk to you about, Toby, and it's a very important one, is inclusion, right? And diversity within the industry. And I saw on Seeking Alpha, I think that your CFO, Jushi CFO, Kim Bambach, she was on the podcast. I listened to that. You're obviously the EVP and co-head of legal affairs. So tell us what it's like to be a female leader within a major MSO cannabis company.
Yeah. So Kim, I work with her every day and she's great. And she is one of the reasons I joined. I kind of, when you asked me, I gave you the high level, but during my interview process, you know, they even know I knew one of the founders, they made me go through this whole thing and take all these tests. And we still do it for our executives to make sure we've got like the right people, but I mean, it was intense. And during one of my last interviews, she came in and interviewed me and basically was like, come join us. They're doing this right. I was like their first pick to come in as female CFO, like jump on in with me, be the next one. And I was like, all right, I got to do this. So she
Nice.
really kind of inspired, I was like on the kind of, female perspective of things. Cause that is kind of something, unfortunately, I have to think about when I'm joining a company, to make sure that, that the company is one that really honors inclusion and diversity and wants that to be part of their philosophy, because
Sure.
there are companies that don't, unfortunately, to this day and age. But I think that's changing a lot.
Yeah.
I think that, and now I can't remember the rest of the question.
Well, you were talking about, so she said, now's the time, let's do this. It's a good company. You were like, you're all in. Um, yeah. And then you were talking about, how diversity and inclusion is a problem as a whole, but it seems to be getting better. And in my perspective, it seems like the cannabis industry could really be a leader, and a pioneer when it comes to doing things differently than what other legacy industries have done in the past.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think there's a big opportunity there. I just wrote a byline for Sway. I think it was just published last week, or early, actually Monday this week. And basically, as part of International Women's Day, my Choose to Challenge was challenging the cannabis industry to take up mentoring, and really, hey, if you're an executive, go get yourself a mentee. If you're a mentee, go get yourself a mentor. I'm happy to help, be like a matchmaker. But yeah, I've been really fortunate enough in my career, mostly on the legal, all on the legal side, to have mentors and to be a mentee. And really, I think that's a huge way for women and minorities to have really great career growth, because there's things that, we might not know, that other, by growing up, like our peers might not have experienced, and we might not have friends or family that we can ask a question like, oh, what do you wear to your first board meeting? Or
Right.
how do I negotiate, an increase in my salary? What is everyone else making? Because no one's telling me, that kind of stuff. So having a mentor, to be in a safe place where you can ask those questions and get real answers. And usually, and I kind of, in the article, or byline, I say it like, preferably not somebody who's your manager,
Right.
somebody who, you can kind of feel comfortable with, and ask questions that you would not normally ask your manager. And so I think that's really an important piece. I think, obviously there's so many things to do, but I like to pick things that I have control over,
Sure.
and that I can contribute, and that are things that I've experienced with. So that's what I chose to challenge people with, because it's something that I currently do on a regular basis and have been involved in my entire legal career. And I think if everybody else, there are a lot of people who do it, but if the people who aren't, particularly in the cannabis industry, get into it, I think that's like a piece to that diversity and inclusion puzzle.
Yeah, no, I think that that's very sound advice. It's wise to have a mentor, someone that you can learn from, who has more experience. Because when you're just getting started in any industry, that type of stuff is valuable. That knowledge is valuable to have, in addition to the hands-on experience as well, right? What is the most impactful thing that one of your mentors has ever told you?
Really, to just go with your gut. I think as a young lawyer, they kind of, the way the American legal system, education system works, is they're just like, you go to school, you learn how to think, and then they say, okay, go get a job. And you have
And you
no
have like $120,000 in debt, and you're like,
yeah.
okay, here, good luck.
And so you kind of go in, and I think there are people who go in and they, really thrive in that, and they can, challenge themselves to figure things out and get there really quickly. And I think I'm fortunate to have that type of personality where I'm always trying to make myself better and challenge myself. And so that, I was able to really be successful, but you do question yourself a lot. Am I making the right decision? Am I giving the right advice? Particularly when there's, 3 different options, and none of them are right, none of them are wrong, 100%, what is, how do I find that right thing? And I think you got to be who you are, and you have to be, you make those choices in a way that's comfortable for you and that you can feel confident about. And so I think my most recent mentor was actually my boss. So I kind of broke one of my rules in my last company. But he recruited me to kind of be his right hand and just, hey, go with your gut. You've got really good instincts. And when I see you don't go with your gut, you're in that uncomfortable range where things might then, you have that domino effect. So really just, kind of doubling down on my confidence and just, helping me make the right decisions are usually what my instincts are.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah. I mean, when I think back to some of the mentors that I've had, it's just it's so beneficial. Like I said, I can't speak enough about how you can kind of pick someone, I hate to use that term, but pick someone's brain and really start to understand your role and kind of what value you can add instead of just going right out of the gate and, maybe stepping outside your lane or doing things where you're just not quite ready for yet. And mentorship's a good way to kind of be groomed, especially, as a new entrant into an industry, but even a new industry, in general, like cannabis is. So
100%. And sometimes you don't even know, you get like really invaluable feedback that you didn't even know, he could tell when, someone was trying to convince me to go another way, and I was he could tell that, he gave me that feedback, like, hey, like your decision was right the first time, just stick with it, go with it. And I didn't even realize that like other people knew that I was,
and how reassuring.
I think he just knew me so well. But yeah, no, and it wasn't like it got knocked against my, performance record or anything. Again, it wasn't a wrong decision and I didn't do anything wrong, but to be able to just, better yourself for personal growth, and then personal growth obviously leads to career growth. So yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Go get yourself a mentor. Go get yourself a mentee.
Yes.
And for a mentor, he's now turned in, I'm not his mentor, but he asked me questions, to help him manage, we don't work with each other any longer, but to help him be a better manager. And so it's really not just the mentee getting all the benefits. The mentor gets a huge amount of benefits because you can see some of the stuff that maybe your subordinate employees are struggling with, or things in your company that you may not like that somebody is doing well at another company, or that you're doing really well and they're not. But you get to see that perspective that your subordinate employees are not coming up and calling you and, laying on you. So
right.
I think it's really like 50 mutually beneficial to one another.
Yeah. I mean, iron sharpens iron, right? And anybody who says that they've got it all figured out and they've stopped learning is foolish, because we're always growing and we're always changing and things are evolving, and especially in an industry like cannabis. So to have that back and forth with a mentor is mutually beneficial, right? And I totally agree with you with what you're saying. And so, Toby, as we wrap up, I want to give you the floor, and just anything that's top of mind or you want to leave the audience with, go ahead.
I think I'm just going to double down on the mentoring.
Yeah.
Because it's something that's just
you're
so
passionate about it. Yeah.
Timely, and I'm really passionate. Yeah, I'm passionate about it. And also kind of just the diversity inclusion generally. I think now is the time for people to step up, to be heard. I think people are being heard, but I think it's now the time to come up with solutions that are long-term solutions to, our kind of global diversity inclusion issues. So, I'm seeing a lot of companies, say, hey, we support this, we support that, but this is the time for everyone to come up and do something about it. And I implore everybody to do what's in their capabilities. So again, I'm not going to solve the world's problems, and I don't expect anyone else to. But I think if there's something that you've got in your control and your fingertips, and that it's something that you do to share that with other people, whether it be on LinkedIn, whether it be with your human resources department, your boss, your mentor, whatever. Bring those ideas to the forefront. And if there's something that you can do yourself, like me talking about mentoring, go for it, do it. This is your time to shine.
Very well said. Great advice. Toby, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I know that the audience got a lot out of it. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more about Jushi?
Sure. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We're under Jushi. So our Jushi Holdings Inc. is jushico.com. We also have a Jushi Holdings Inc., like I said, LinkedIn page, Facebook page, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. And then our operations goes by Beyond Hello. It's Beyond Hello, 2 different words. And so you can find that on, I'm like typing it in, sorry.
Go ahead, no worries.
Beyond Hello, BEYOND hello.com, where you can find out about our operations.
And y'all are also trading on the Canadian exchange as well. What's your ticker?
It's JUSH, JUSH.
JUSH. There you go. Well, thank you so much again, Toby. I would love to have you on again in the near future as the industry continues to evolve, and hopefully we start to see some cannabis reform and ultimate legalization at some point.
Thanks for having me, Kevin, and I'm happy to come on anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, and thank you all for listening. Bye.